Hi everyone, today I'm going to show how to recreate Waves Vitamin using Ableton Live stock devices with an Ableton Live audio effect rack. So Waves Vitamin is a commonly used plugin in psytrance bass production because it induces phase shift in a way that sounds particularly pleasing even with just stock settings. It's very commonly used in various multiband processing to sculpt that perfect psytrance bass. So an example of how it sounds would be, and I'll even pull up an oscilloscope, is first we have a basic saw wave. Ignore these little thingies, I just messed with it slightly, but effectively it's just a saw wave. And if we turn on Waves Vitamin, we get this slight phase shift effect, where we have a little bit of this interesting transient here at the beginning, makes it a little bit snappier, and we have a clearly different shape here. And the way the interface works is like so. You have these four bands, you can kind of move them around, and this is what causes the phase shift. Slightly changes the sound, generally sounds cool, but a lot of people just slap it on, keep it at the default setting, or maybe slightly mess with this low one, because this probably has the biggest impact on the sound. Kind of make it a little deeper sounding, especially if you bring it down to the lows here. So this is purely caused by phase shift. So I won't bother explaining all the details around phase shift in this video just because it's not my specific area of expertise, and there's also a ton of tutorials about it on YouTube already. But if you don't know about it, I recommend you look it up because phase shift is kind of one of the most important ways on how to craft modern psytrance basses. So how this plugin works is by having four crossover filters. So you have, as you can see, these visual representations of effectively where each band starts and the next ends. So you kind of spread them out. Here's a band, here's one, and here's another. They're kind of close to each other, right? And so what's actually happening here is these are just filters, right? Here's a low pass filter and a high pass filter, and then kind of a crossover, and kind of the same thing generally going on for each one. And so every time a crossover like this happens, what's actually going on is a sort of phase shift effect, where the frequencies around that spot are rotated by 180 degrees. So to demonstrate this, the audio is going to cut out because this particular plugin, unlike Plugin Doctor, steals the audio, but it'll still work just fine to demonstrate. So it's just causing this. This is, in fact, let me kind of really show what's going on. So each of these is 180 degrees of phase shift at the frequency specified here. And that's what's giving it that specific sound. So you can see each of these, this purple line is the phase. Here's, for instance, 84 hertz. It's roughly around 100. Here's 100-ish. Right, it's not exact because this band is also kind of influencing where it is. They're not, they all kind of influence each other a little bit, but at the stock settings, like this one's like 90, and I want to say this one's 550 or something like that. So you can see it's at 79 in this case. Doesn't matter. The point is each of these you have some phase shift going on, and that's what gives it that sound. So it's actually a very simple plugin. I mean, unless you're using all of these things, right? In which case you can see how the frequency increases in that specific area, right? It kind of works like some kind of EQ compressor type thing. But honestly, most people that I know, they just do this. It's really just for the phase shift that people use it. But you can just totally bypass this and it still causes it. So it's crossover filters. Crossover filters cause phase shift. So if we just figure out a way to create the same sort of clean phase shift without actually changing the frequency response, right, without actually making anything louder or quieter, then, well, we would have a waves or a vitamin clone, excuse me. We'd have a vitamin clone. And so how do we do that? Here's my attempt. I'll grab a fresh kind of instance of vitamin here real quick, just to have something to compare it to. Just get rid of this old vitamin. Open up our analyzer. Here's stock vitamin, and here's my recreation. You can see it's a little bit different. Some of the slopes of the different, I think the filter algorithm, or maybe the slope or something that I used is a tad different, but honestly, for all intents and purposes, it sounds similar enough that I don't think it matters. And more importantly, it's free and easy to create by yourself. You don't need to buy Waves Vitamin. You can just do the same thing with 4 of your own phase rotations. So I have this custom device here. You may have already seen it when I was flipping back and forth. We have Vitamin, we have my recreation. And the way it works is I have 4 custom devices which I created, and all they do is they just cause phase rotation at a certain frequency using filters and stuff. So let's go ahead and go into an example where I just go over how one of these phase rotations works. So here we have some audio. Let me just turn this thing off and let me demonstrate that it's nice and clean first. Just a regular saw wave. I think I lowered I think I lowered the fourth harmonic or something like that just because I'm creating a bass like that right now. But basically it's just a relatively typical looking saw wave. And then when we turn this on, we have a single phase rotation that we can work with. Right, and you can see how it's affecting it. Honestly, just one phase rotation has the biggest impact, which is kind of the one in this sort of sub-frequency region. So this is already very, very impactful. And if we open up the analyzer, we'll actually see that the same thing is going on here. This time we have a single phase rotation because that's what this device is for. And in this above track here with the full example, all I did was I stacked 4 of these together and I picked 4 frequencies that matched relatively closely what Vitamin is doing and honestly has a pretty similar sound. So how does this device work? We have three things in this rack here. We have a low pass filter, a high pass filter, and a crossover filter. So effectively the low pass filter, in fact if we just do these one by one, it induces a little bit of phase shift at the target frequency. So let me put this somewhere where it's nice and visible. So here's 200 Hertz. And you can see right here we're at negative 90 degrees of phase shift. Then the high pass filter causes positive 90 degrees at the same spot. So if you put them together, you kind of get this pattern here, where now we phase shifted it by 90 degrees at that frequency. So this all looks great, except if you look at this green line, this is the frequency response. And right at the target frequency, we dip down to like negative infinity. I mean, it's obviously that's a problem. And so all you really have to do is just compensate for that by adding a little crossover filter that'll just kind of boost in exactly the inverse sort of pattern to bring it back up. So if you put that back in, once again, it's at the same frequency. You can see it's following the same macro. I kind of glossed over this, but these are all just mapped to the same macro. We have the frequency and a single thing controlling all 3 of them. Nothing too crazy here, it's just one knob. Right, and then when we add in this crossover filter, 2 things happen. Number 1, the frequency response becomes flat, and number 2, our phase rotation gets stacked. So now it's 180 degrees and it looks exactly like what Vitamin did, with just a 1 out of 4. Note that for this to work, you need to make sure that this crossover filter has phase inversion enabled. So if you click these buttons, these invert the phase, and that's what gives you that full rotation. Otherwise, it actually cancels it out in the opposite direction, and those 90-degree cancellations from here just get canceled out. But we want to exacerbate them, so you want to make sure to get these. And so just to demonstrate these one last time so that you can recreate this on your Ableton, all you really need to do is a low-pass filter. Make sure it's at 12 dB per octave, 12 dB, 12 dB, low pass, high pass, and band pass with the frequency mapped to the same knob here. And that's it. It works fine this way. Oh, and lastly, of course, this utility. We phase invert, and then we boost it by 6 dB, because without this, you get this little dip here. And as you can see, it's exactly 6 decibels here. So you still get the phase inversion, but just to compensate for it and to make everything line up, now we have a perfect crossover. Right, and so to get our Vitamin clone to work, let's go back into what I have here. It's really just 4 of these devices. So if we open this up, you'll see that all it is 4 just in series, so they're not parallel, right? I'm not kind of blending between 4 of them at the same time and routing it individually into 4. I'm actually just applying them one after the other. This is how it's structured in Vitamin, and this is what actually makes it all work this way. And so for each of these, I just saved the earlier device I created as a perfect phase rotation kind of little macro knob here, added 4 of these, and then I created 4 macro knobs here to control all 4 of these. And so just, map to whatever frequency you want. And then as a result, we end up with the same thing. Very, very convenient. Just as one last demonstration to kind of prove that they sound almost exactly the same. They're slightly different. You could tweak them a little bit to be like exactly the same. But here we have our recreation. Let me kind of get a fresh instance of it. We have our clone. And if we open up our analyzer, here once again we see that they're very, very similar. I think close enough that it just doesn't really make much of a difference, honestly. And then if we listen to it, we'll turn off this analyzer here, close this. And whoops, gotta turn that one on. And let's start with the vitamin. And we'll do our recreation as well. Slightly different, but very similar. And you can even see the waveform is very, very similar when you switch between them. Right, so about 95% the same. Something to do with maybe the exact slope of the filters that I was using with these Ableton stock ones, or their exact crossover frequencies make them slightly different. But once again, I just don't think that that's actually a significant difference. And if it lets you avoid buying the Waves plugin, well, you might as well do it this way. It's easier on your CPU and you can really understand what's going on. It's not some kind of magic black box, it's just 4 phase rotations at strategic frequencies. So I hope this comes in handy for somebody creating psytrance basses or any other kind of sound, really. It's a very convenient device to have for your own phase rotations, and you can avoid buying all these multiband plugins because this is really all they're doing. Thanks so much for watching.